It is official. Aaron Rodgers is now a New York Jet. Who won the Packers-Jets trade with all the picks? And we'll get into all the nitty-gritties and what does exactly it mean and what is the value of Aaron Rodgers now that he is a New York Jet, and who's got the most draft capital in the 2023 NFL draft, and who's got the fewest ways to improve their team on draft weekend. Coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL on Twitter. Thank you, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Those Twitter handles at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. That's where you get your mailbag questions in. Our final pre-draft mailbag on tomorrow's episode, and then it will be draft day, Matt, and I'm pumped for it. And the Packers and the Jets were able to figure this thing out. By the way, a little bit later, one more tease, some late line movement on a certain quarterback. Levis. A lot of heat right now, and the bettors are believing in it. So when it comes to the Jets and the Packers, Matt, how did you feel about the haul that the Packers ended up getting? They did get a deal done pre-draft, and it did involve first-round picks, but not exactly how we all expected.
Yeah, and how about it? Tomorrow's draft day eve. I mean, we're right around the corner here. This is pretty awesome. And the week is going slow. It always does for me leading up to it. But I'm also swamped with stuff to do. So I'm pretty psyched. I can't wait for it. My first thought, when I saw the trade go through, I actually thought of you because we've thought about this a lot. And the one thing I was shocked about was not that there's a conditional pick next year, but what the conditions were. Yes. I mean, it's playing time, not – hey, is Rodgers a Jet? So maybe we could start there. I mean, that's what I would have wanted if I were the Jets was, yeah, I'm cool with sending you a conditional pick, but it's based on whether I still have the player or not.
Yeah, I want 65% of the snaps in 2024.
Right. Or at least he's on the opening day roster or, at least let me know that I get 2 years out of this guy. And I do guess that if you're looking at this from just sticking with the conditional pick, if he plays 65+% of the snaps, they probably had a good year. Probably.
Yes.
If he didn't, they probably had a crappy year. I mean, that's I feel more strong about than the other way around. So you'd probably get at least an early second-round pick, worst case scenario.
You're getting a pick between 25 and 50. You're getting a late first probably, or that 20 and 50. You're getting probably a late first, probably a playoff team pick if Rodgers plays well and plays the whole season. You're getting a late first or maybe a first half of the second round pick, depending on how things go. So and that's a future pick too. So usually that's devalued by a round. So at first glance, when you see it, and it was Aaron Rodgers, pick 15 in this draft, a 5th round pick this year going to the Jets, and the Packers are getting in return pick 13 in this draft. So a swap there of 13 and 15, just 2 spots in the first round. The 2nd round pick, number 42, the first of their 2nd round picks from the Jets, a 6th round pick, and then that conditional pick that could be a 2nd round pick. And if Rodgers plays 65% of the snaps, it becomes a 1st round pick next year. And it's so convoluted, and you see all that, and you think, oh, that was actually a really good haul for the Packers. But then when you strip it all down and break it all down, what it ended up being is kind of what we had talked about and what we all thought, which is pretty much a fair deal, which is 2 second-round picks. It was 2 second
give or take, right.
And a little extra grease. That's what grease to get it done before the draft. And so this doesn't, hang over everybody's heads until past June.
So, I mean, the Elijah Moore trade had something to do with this, but the Jets got what we all think is a great quarterback still, even if he's slightly declining, and still have a 1st and 2nd in the mid, in the middle of the rounds, So I would imagine at least one of those 2 picks will be an offensive lineman, if not both. But you may end up with, I don't know, Broderick Jones and John Michael Schmitz, or they're still in good shape to improve and make Rodgers' life easier or build a line that'll last past Rodgers. It wouldn't shock me at all if he has a Peyton Manning or Tom Brady like finish to his career, in a new home. And I'm not saying he's going to win the Super Bowl, but I think they're going to be in the mix for sure. if they were in the NFC, they might be the second or third best team in the conference.
He can still perform at a high level.
Yeah.
It's an offense, Hackett, that he knows, and it's going to be easy for him. Brought Lazard in, so at least one of the receivers is really up to speed on that offense, and then we'll see how quickly the rest of the offense. It's not that different from the terminology in the offense they were running anyway. So I think it's going to be a quick, Rodgers doesn't always work super well with newer receivers, which would be the question. But man, I can't imagine
there.
I can't imagine that Garrett Wilson doesn't have a really big year and end up being his number one, at least by the second half of the season, even if Lazard is his, go-to early in the season because he knows where to be a little bit better than the other guys.
I think in like best ball drafts, Garrett Wilson's going like wide receiver 8, like he's going unbelievably high. And like the dynasty stuff I do, he's like a top 5 receiver now. I mean, like his stock is through the roof, which I totally understand. And speaking of Ohio State receivers, though, maybe the Packers don't see it this way at all. But I think moving up those 2 spots really gives them a much better chance of getting Smith-Njigba too.
That was going to be my next question to you. Who are the Pack? Like, what is the big value of moving up from 15 to 13? Because overall, and I think it's a great move by the Jets to say, here's some extra value when it doesn't really hurt you much because you're still, we keep talking about it. There's clearly, 15 or so first round grades, clean grades, 15 to 18. So you're still in that range. You're not moving out of anything value wise necessarily. Could the Packers have gone up and got the guy you were going to get at 13 possibly? Are you looking at Jackson Smith-Njigba? Probably not. But were you looking at an offensive lineman? Yeah, maybe. And maybe that's why the Packers wanted to be at 13, get in front of the Pats and the Jets now. Is it Broderick Jones there? Is it Paris Johnson if he's there, Skoronski, or Jackson Smith-Njigba? I think those are probably the 4 most likely names I would put at 13 to the Packers now.
Yeah, and I looked at it 2 ways. Like, I don't know if they love Smith-Njigba or not. I love that fit. They never use a first-round pick on a receiver. They may not even be considering it. I mean, maybe they look at him as a slot only. We're not using a first-round pick on that guy. But I kind of looked at it like, boy, I'd really like to get ahead of the Patriots if I do love Smith-Njigba. And I also looked at it this way, that if it were draft night, Thursday night, and Team 15, I don't care what team it is, Team 15 calls Team 13 and says, what's it cost us to swap? It's probably a 3rd round pick, right? I mean, so
it's only 100 points on the chart, which is like a 5th round pick or a 4th round pick, but it costs a little bit more. This is draft night trade. It's going to cost, 3rd round pick.
So if they want to move out of 13, they get a little more for it than if they move out of 15,
Yep. So good trade. I think this is 2 good GMs making sure they both felt good. I think the Packers can kind of strut around and say, hey, look, we got a lot. We kind of got what we were looking for. And the Jets are like, sure, you can parade it around, but we were fine if it was pretty much the same value we were planning on giving up all along for Aaron Rodgers, maybe a little extra to get this thing done before draft day. And now everyone's happy and we can stop talking about Aaron Rodgers now to the New York Jets.
I don't know why it took this long, but you're right. And I do think the Packers can use the words first round picks, in more than one time. So,
it's like,
we get one next year and we moved up in the first round. You can, okay. You did. And you got more than I thought they would, to be very honest. So I would be very happy if I'm Green Bay. He wasn't going back. I think they're happy he's gone. That ship not only sailed, but it lit on fire,
So to answer the question, who won? I think it's a win-win. Love it. Yeah. Love it for everybody. Love it for Rodgers. Love it for the Packers. Love it for the Jets. Great job.
And where are these teams, I think, is the question, though. Like, I'm not saying this could blow up in the Jets' face, but the AFC and their division is so hard.
Their schedule is
right. The schedule's brutal.
They were a 7-win team. It was a pretty tough schedule last year. Did
brutal they quarterback play?
You got to believe they improved 3 games. I mean, how could it not be a 10-win team? Right?
I think so, too. Yeah, I think so, too. I was listening to Mike Sando react to it, and he did something along the lines of, even if their defense special teams goes back 5 to 8 spots in EPA or DVOA, however you want to rank it, but their offense goes up 10 spots and it was near the bottom of the league, those teams that end in those neighborhoods are almost always playoff teams or in double-digit win type of teams. But if we were, I'll probably do this no matter what after the draft. If we power rank the AFC, I don't know where I put the Jets, though. I mean, they're 5 at best.
I wouldn't be. You shouldn't be floored if the Jets are the 1 seed.
I can hear that too. Right.
You shouldn't be floored if they're the last wild card either.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think the Packers are a very good football team. If you were to power rank the AFC East, I think the Patriots are clearly 4. I don't know about the other three.
On paper, and we have to see it come together.
Yeah.
I'll take the Packers. I mean, I'll take the Jets top to bottom over the Dolphins top to bottom. Yeah. I think Hall of Fame quarterback makes that much of a difference.
So Bills are 3 for you, or are you saying they're
no,
behind?
Bills
are still 1. Okay.
Bills, Jets, Dolphins, Pats.
Bills, Jets, Dolphins, Pats.
But
I think I agree with that, but that's a cluster.
On paper too, like Jets, like we could go through this on another episode where we look through and go player by player, because you could make the argument that the Jets are just as good as the Bills are at quarterback. Long term, I'd rather have Josh Allen, obviously, but for this year, maybe not. I mean, we're talking about Aaron Rodgers.
I mean, mentioning Sando, when the quarterback tiers come out, Allen and Rodgers are going to be in the same tier.
Oh, now I'm trying to think of the position groups that the Bills are clearly better than the Jets.
I mean, I wouldn't say their defense is better. I think they're both good, but I wouldn't say it's
running
better.
Back. I like Diggs, but not wide receiver as a whole.
Probably not. Both the lines need a little bit of work, and I think they'll get it in the coming days. And I bet there's some Dolphins fans saying, hey, we don't have any holes either, but I have questions about your quarterback.
Well, yeah, and when Tua played, they were really good.
Yeah.
And so I like where they're at. Like, this is really tight at the top. But I think even Dolphins fans would say Josh Allen and Aaron Rodgers better than Tua.
And certainly way more trustworthy in terms of staying on the field. And the Dolphins are going to come up in a negative light later in the show too. How about that tease?
That is a perfect tease, because we're talking about draft capital and looking at not just the picks and number of picks and where they are, but when you convert that to what the projected wins above replacement, how valuable are these picks on a year-to-year basis? And the Miami Dolphins do not rank high on that list. We'll talk about the top and the bottom of that list and what it means and who's got the most draft capital and the least draft capital in this draft. And Will Levis, a lot of heat, Matt, in the days leading up to the NFL draft. Next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel. And this is a perfect segue into our next segment, too, because at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, Major League Baseball is back every day. We're talking grand slams, no-hitters, double plays, and new customers can step up to the plate and get a no-sweat first bet, $1,000 back if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up to place that first bet and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets. But I mean, it is draft season and there are so many draft props, and the draft prop, Matt, that is the most interesting right now as of today in the last 12 to 18 hours is Will Levis is climbing in the odds to go #1 even overall, not even just #2 anymore. He has climbed to 6-1 from, I think it was 50-1 odds 24 hours ago. We're talking 6-1 odds now for Will Levis to be the #1 pick in the NFL draft. So clearly people are talking, including Will Levis, by the way, and we'll get to that next. But you can bet on tons of draft props. The first pick, the second pick, first wide receiver, first offensive lineman, how many wide receivers, how many quarterbacks in the first round. Tons of draft props that are always so much fun every year. Major League Baseball, NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs as well. So don't miss out on your chance for a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL, Major League Baseball, and of course, the Locked On Podcast Network. Okay, Matt.
This Levis stuff's a little crazy to me.
It's because we talked about it. We went through the mock draft Monday yesterday, and plugged in guy Peter King's talking about the heat with Will Levis, and he was a guy that was going to drop out of the first round. Everyone hates him, and he kicks puppies or whatever, puts mayonnaise in his coffee.
Oh, right, can't like that.
Whatever, he eats bananas with the peel on. Whatever you could say about Will Levis, there was something to not like about him. But NFL GMs might like him a little bit more. At least that's what everybody all the insiders are saying. Does somebody know something? And one of the rumors out there, Matt, is that Will Levis himself is telling friends and family that he's going #1.
Well, I do have a lot to say about this. First of all, I am not a Levis believer. I'd have a hard time using a first-round pick on him, to be very honest. But I've been doing this a long time. I've been in buildings. I know how this works. First of all, he might have a very good PR guy too, / agent. We know that media matters and Twitter.
There are actors behind the scenes.
Yes, absolutely. There's the Will Levis camp is winning Best Supporting Actor for sure. But I also know I believe this to be true because people told me this, that he didn't interview particularly well at the combine. But I kind of look at those combine interviews as way overrated because 15 minutes is, you're dragged around. It's a long day. You're not having a good day. So maybe when he's in buildings for the day, he's a lot more likable, reliable, whatever. Maybe he's an acquired taste. I'm just guessing. But you spend a day with someone's a whole lot different than spending 15 minutes with them. I just know that from any walk of life. The more involved coaches get, though, and start studying these guys, they're going to look at things that he does well. And obviously, he's big, he's strong, he's projectable. I've seen people that look like him excel in the league. And the other thing, more so than the other top quarterbacks, the scheme that he runs at Kentucky is the most NFL translatable friendly of all these guys. And he had the most hardship as well. I mean, the least help. He wasn't at Bama. He wasn't at Ohio State. So I always used to say this about Sam Bradford. Sam Bradford's first 4 or 5 years in the league were not good, but he had so many things working against him. Injuries, changing teams, coordinators, no O-line. And I always used to use this reference. I could be Sam Bradford's accusing attorney, or I could defend him, and I could make an equal case for both. You know what I mean? And
right, yeah,
maybe Levis has some of that.
Absolutely. You can look at Will Levis' tape and like, what are you doing? And throwing some interceptions, some head scratching stuff. But then you go back to 2021, different coordinator, similar scheme, similar terminology, though. And he was a lot better. And then you say, his supporting cast was worse. He was getting hit a lot. But so look, he's tough. He was fighting through injuries, fighting through getting hit a lot at quarterback. And then you get him on the whiteboard, and maybe he's further ahead because he knows the terminology because of the system he's been in for a couple of years. So if you put the first round quarterbacks on the board, he might know your terminology better. He might know the reads better. So that might come off better. And of course, throwing the ball, he's got that. He's got a cannon of an arm. He's pretty athletic as well. He's rocked up, well built. So as far as just a scout looking at Will Levis saying, well, he's got the size, athleticism, arm of a franchise NFL quarterback. So yeah, I agree. You could really build a case for both sides. And it's really just hard to know what each team is looking for, how he interviews each time. And I think if you're talking about someone who might be a late riser, you're probably talking about someone where coaches were involved. And you're talking about some situation where when he's going around and doing the 30 visits, he's impressive on the whiteboard when he's remembering the things that they talked about in previous interviews with him. And he's able to dial up the plays and prove that he's maybe closer to playing than maybe some of the other guys. And that can really impress a coach, especially.
I'm taking Young out of the equation. I mean, I think it's set in stone. He's number one. If you want to throw away your money at your 6-1 for first overall, fine. But the other two, Richardson and Stroud, maybe they weren't super impressive. I've heard Stroud, I don't say he's hard to get along with, but is not the most outgoing, fun guy, and we have these S2 results. Maybe a lot of teams really put stock into that. Or you bring Richardson in, and by all accounts, Richardson's a wonderful human being, but you might put him on the whiteboard and be like, he doesn't have a clue. He hasn't done anything. So maybe those two going backwards pushes Levis up too. You know what I mean?
It's hard for me. I still don't buy it. I need a couple more sleeps, Matt. I need Thursday morning for this to really, really still be the thing.
Yeah.
And then I'll believe it. It's still in that transition from lying season to some truth coming out. The Levis one, I'm still not quite on board buying. I don't think he's fallen out of the first round or anything crazy. But I still think he's between pick 10, 11, and 23 guy still.
Okay.
That's what
I have kind of bought in that Houston won't go quarterback at 2. This one's harder for me to buy. But what if Houston loves him? I mean, if you love him at 12, take him at 2. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, because it's quarterback. And
quarterback.
That's where it gets difficult in this draft. That's why it's going to be so much fun, Matt.
No doubt.
The Hendon Hooker one, he's got a lot of helium as well. I just feel like it's so many in the past that we hear about, like with his combination of there's a lot to like as well, but he's even older than Levis, and that's another thing against Levis is kind of the age factor. Sometimes it's good, but it's like you want a guy to be experienced, but you don't want him to be too old either. Because if you're not good against your competition until you're 26 and you're playing against 18-year-olds, right? Or 25 against 18-year-olds.
Sure, you should be beaten.
It's a lot different if you're 20 and beating up on 18-year-olds than if you're if you're 24 and 25, beating up on 18-year-olds. The age, the injury, the offense with Hendon Hooker, I'm just not seeing it. I don't see how that adds up to a first-round guy. And a top 12, I've seen him multiple times now early. And that's one I can't buy yet either. So we'll see. Maybe I'm being too stubborn on some of the late information that's correct, because sometimes the late information comes in great. I'm going to wait a couple days and see on Thursday morning how I'm feeling about some of those things.
I mean, I could understand the Vikings taking Hooker maybe, but I can't see a top 12 or a trade up into the top 15. I mean, because he really is not going to play this year.
And the one thing we've continually seen, history tells us that it's not going to go quarterback. It's just not going to happen. The quarterbacks are going to slide more than they're going to go higher than we think on draft. So wherever we're at right now, the quarterbacks are going to go later than that. I think we're starting to see that with that whole Texans number 2 conversation.
So Young aside, I don't know if we'll have time to do draft props between now and then or not. If you went across the board on the over, what I mean is later, if the over under on where the quarterbacks go is 4.5, I mean over as in 5 or later, later in the draft, you think if you went across the board on the overs, you'd make money? Young aside, because he's going 1.
Yes, because there's so little wiggle room to go under.
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, some of them are 2 or 2.5 or,
right.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I tend to agree. I mean, especially Hooker.
Next, Matt.
Yes.
Draft capital. This is interesting. This is from PFF, correct?
It is.
The list of draft capital for every team in the NFL. We're not going to go through every team, but who has the most draft capital, who has the least draft capital, and what's the difference? How valuable are these picks on a year-to-year basis from a wins above replacement metric, according to PFF? Next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process, and it should be a lifelong process because we're always changing, and hopefully we're all trying to change for the better and always growing as human beings. And you're going through all of the obstacles in life, going through different phases of your life. So while you grow and change, and while you're going through that lifelong process of understanding, therapy can help you get there. It is all about deepening your self-awareness and understanding, because sometimes we don't know what we want. We don't know how or why we react to certain things the way we do until we talk through those things. BetterHelp connects you with a therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. If you're thinking of giving therapy a try, start with BetterHelp, because it's online therapy, entirely online, designed to be convenient and flexible for your lifestyle and suited to your schedule. All you do is you fill out a brief questionnaire. It doesn't take long at all. You get matched with a licensed therapist. And if you don't like the therapist you're originally matched with, it is easy and completely free. No additional charge to switch therapists at any time. So discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Draft capital. Who has the most power in this draft to improve their football team from a wins above replacement metric, according to Pro Football Focus? And it probably shouldn't surprise folks that the 3 teams with the most draft capital are the 3 teams with multiple first-round picks, and that is the Houston Texans, the Seattle Seahawks, and the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, so I was just fiddling with this while you were doing the read there, and I just want to take one quick angle, and then I want to dig into the tops and bottoms here, because we were talking off the air that there are 3 teams now that don't have a first-round pick next year, and there's 3 teams that have an extra one. And the Browns, Jets, and Panthers are without their first-round pick. I'm assuming Rodgers plays enough snaps. The Texans, Packers, and Bears all have the extra first-round pick. So if you factor in last year and this year, Houston not only is first this year in draft capital by a pretty wide margin, I might add, but they also are one of the teams with future first-round pick. Chicago is 6th this year in draft capital with an extra first-round pick, and Green Bay's 9th right now in draft capital with a future first-round pick. On the other side, the Panthers are 8th, but we know almost all of that's going to first overall, and they don't have a first-round pick next year. The Jets are 22nd now this year in first round pick, or without a first round pick, and the 22nd this year. And the Browns are scary. The Browns are 29th now, and they don't have a first round pick next year. Like, ooh, Watson better be really, really good.
Yeah, when you trade 3 first round picks for a player, it's going to set you back if that player is not good. And it's already, even if the player is good, it's going to be difficult to replenish because
as like a 60 million cap hit too.
Yeah. So, you can't sign as many players. You can't keep as many of the players you already have, and you can't draft new stars in the early round with those picks. So it hits you from all sides. And you can really see the difference with this metric from Pro Football Focus, the wins above replacements, and what value you normally get and what should be expected to get from a draft pick. And when you look at the Houston Texans, who have multiple first round picks, and they've got a ton of picks throughout the draft. I think they have 12 total picks, I think.
Right.
If you lopped off their final 5 picks in the draft, all their late round picks, they would still have the most draft capital with just their first 6 picks added up together is even more than still the Seahawks, who have multiple extra picks, including 2 firsts, 1 in the top 5.
And I'm looking at this too. Like, even just their 2 first round picks is worth the 10th. They would be 10th best in the league or 9th best in the league. They'd be ahead of Atlanta.
Yes.
So
they should theoretically add as many wins as the top 10 in this class if only you were counting just pick 2 and 12. That's how valuable those.
Yeah, that's how valuable it is. Right. I think it's really interesting, and it's hard to explain this chart, but I mean, just kind of trust us here that many teams have a pick worth much more than the last 4 or 5 bad teams that have nothing in this draft. One first round pick.
Yeah, and this PFF war is what's projected. So let's say you whiff with pick 2. Well, there goes all your value, right? So you better hit a good player there to give you all that value. Usually, if you do hit, it's a quarterback. But that's talking about you draft a Hall of Fame quarterback, or you could get a complete bust of a quarterback. So where are you going to be on that value chart? How many wins are you actually need to get with your player? Because you have to draft a player and they have to accumulate these wins. So this is just projected and what you can expect to get. But clearly, it's nicer to have more picks and more valuable picks than fewer valuable picks to build your football franchise.
And it goes without saying you have to hit on the picks, of course. I mean, and not everyone's going to draft even 50%. I mean, if you get 50% of your hits is great. Or if you get 2 starters out of a draft, great. But I don't think we need to convince anybody that having more draft capital is better than having less.
Yes, absolutely. What's interesting, though, is the Philadelphia Eagles, who are the other team that has 2 first-round picks at 10 and 31, they're actually only 12th on this list because they don't have very many draft picks. They only have 4 more picks after those first 2 picks in round 1.
As you said that, they're traditionally a trade down team. I could really see them trading down and getting something for next year, as they often do. Maybe pick up 2 more picks in the mid rounds. That would make perfect sense. So
especially from 31.
Yeah, exactly. They might get a star at 10 and be like, we're good. We'll kind of fill in the blanks with some 3rds and 4ths and things like that. So you mentioned the guys at the top. Houston by a wide margin. Seattle and Detroit are shortly after. I mean, kind of standalone as tier 2. Not shocking with their extra first round picks. And then it's the bad teams. I mean, it's the Raiders, the Cardinals, the Bears, the Colts, and then the Panthers with that first overall pick. But the teams at the bottom are a little frightening. Like some of the really good teams are low. And by that, I mean Dallas, Cincy, the Bills. That's just what they earned. They didn't make a lot of trades. They picked late in rounds. The Bengals never move from where they sit. The Ravens are in that market too, except their second round pick went to Roquan Smith. But the bottom teams are pretty darn light. I mean, Miami by a wide margin is 32nd on this. Denver's 31. Your Niners, not surprising, as we've talked about a lot. They start getting active in the 3rd round, but they're the team that picks the latest first pick. But then the Browns at 29, Minnesota at 28. Why is Minnesota so low?
Minnesota does not have a 2nd round pick, I'm pretty sure. They might not even have
Hawkinson.
Hawkinson, there you go.
Yeah, okay. I couldn't put 2 and 2 together. So I'm like, they traded down last year. Didn't they get a couple extra picks this year for that? But no, I think Hawkinson's what's hurting them.
Yeah, and they're picking later in the first round. So, pick 23, I believe it is in round 1. Don't have a 2nd round pick. So, yeah, they're a little bit light there, but at least they do have that first round pick, and they have only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 total picks in this draft. The interesting thing, though, we talked about the Texans and how if you only counted their first round picks, 2 and 12, they'd still be top 10 in projected PFF WAR. Well, if you only count their pick 2, just the second pick in the draft, how much is that usually worth in wins above replacement? Well, that's worth more than the Dolphins' entire draft, the Broncos' entire draft, the Niners' entire draft, the Browns' entire draft, the Vikings' entire draft, and the Baltimore Ravens' entire draft. So there's 6 teams that don't even have as much combined draft pick value as just the Texans pick at number 2 overall.
Sure. And if you were GM of your Niners, you trade every pick they have for number 2.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt at all.
Right.
The 49ers, they're an interesting one too, because they have 11 picks, but they're also late. They're the last team that'll get their first chance to pick a player at 99. Then they pick again at 101, then 102 in those comp picks of late round 3. They don't have any of their original first, second, or third round pick. And then they have 3 fifths. They got 4 sevenths, but so they've got 11 picks. But man, you even pack them all together, you could barely even get into the second round.
Yeah. And fellow Steeler folks, so you're probably on the edge of your seat. They're at 13. I'll take it. Pretty good. Claypool trade has a lot to do with that. But we mentioned, the Browns, they're very low on this list. They don't have a first round pick next year, but that's just like a year later of where the Broncos are, and the Broncos didn't hit on their quarterback. Like, this is going to be 2 years at least of suffering in terms of draft capital for Denver, because they're second to last.
My big takeaway when I look at this is just first of all, you've got to hit, because any of these, if you're looking at it on a graph, one of these little tiny bricks, that's maybe a little 5th round pick could become a superstar player for you. And that changes the entire equation, but this is on average what picks usually end up giving you in a wins above replacement scenario. But when I look at the Texans and how many picks they have, they pick early. They pick again in the top 15. They have a number of picks throughout the draft. And this is new head coach. They're trying to figure out quarterback. This is such an important draft for the Houston Texans more than any other team. They've got to get picks right. And whether they go quarterback or don't go quarterback, they better make that pick correct as well, and that choice correct, and how they attack quarterback. But they have the ability to move around, go up, go back, and really have an opportunity to control the draft, especially since we're pretty sure what's going to happen at number 1. Number 2 is where the draft really starts, if it is Bryce Young at 1. And so they're the most intriguing team by far to me in this entire draft, and how they work this thing. And I can't wait to break down what they end up doing with all this draft capital, how they move around, and if they're able to pull some strings and really make the draft work for them.
And everyone knows they have 2 and they have 12, and we always focus on the first round. But they're going to be in control with great cards in their hand day 2 and day 3 too. Like you said, I want to get out of this pick and trade an early second or for a future first. Boom, we could do that. I want to move up. I can't believe this guy fell. Boom, I'll go get him. I mean, like, they can pretty much do whatever they want.
Absolutely. And they have 2 picks next year to work with, or an extra first round pick next year to work with as well. So, they could pick 2 and 3 in this draft,
right?
If they want,
exactly.
And still have a ton of picks and have a first round pick next year still. So they can do anything they want. I can't wait to see how Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryans maneuver and navigate this 2023 NFL draft.
Let's wrap this up. But the one thing they can't do is get Bryce Young. Unfortunately, I think that's the only thing they
Carolina
can't
Panthers,
do.
And maybe that was the one guy they wanted the most. So
Right.
We'll see if the Panthers did go and get their guy, and if he turns out to be the guy. But in the end, and we're looking at all these quarterbacks. We talked about Levis and Hooker earlier. Anthony Richardson, C.J. Stroud, and even with Bryce Young, it's like, okay, he's number 1, but he's 5'10", 190 pounds. Like, when we're looking back on this draft in 3, 4, 5 years, and we're like, dude, the team at first overall drafted a 5'10" quarterback. Somebody drafted Levis, who was bad as last year. Anthony Richardson only played 1 year, and that was the classic. Oh, we drafted this guy too high. Like, what are gonna? It's so obvious where the talents are with these guys, but it's so obvious when we look back. Like, what'll be like? Oh, well, this guy, he did score bad on the S2. We should have seen that coming. Now every team subscribes to S2, where it was only 2 teams originally. And so that's what's fascinating.
What they think taking an Ohio State quarterback? They haven't had a good one in 50 years.
Exactly.
Right.
Justin Smith, or Justin Fields turns out to be bad too. And you're like, oh, well, nobody can draft an Ohio State quarterback ever again now.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I looked at quarterbacks the first time I saw him, is I just saw blemish. And I'm still having a hard time getting past some of those.
Yeah, and you can really talk yourself into them too. And there's a lot to like about all these quarterbacks. But man, it is an inexact science, and you never know how that's going to go and that development goes, and getting them into the building. And it's fascinating. That's why we love the NFL draft, Matt.
Soon coming up here.
It's coming up. It is absolutely coming up. So get your questions in. Last pre-draft mailbag episode tomorrow at BD Peacock on Twitter, at Williamson NFL, or drop your question in the comments on the new Peacock and Williamson YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed up there. Hit the notification bell. And Matt and I back tomorrow right here, Peacock and Williamson.